to start. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Rules Committee. Great to see everyone on a beautiful, beautiful day. First order of business is call to order. Second is, where's a roll call? Let's do a roll call.
Commissioner Schoonmaker.
Here.
Commissioner Hill. Commissioner Daly.
Here.
Commissioner Jay. Commissioner Frazier. All members are present.
And three of the most important ones are to my right and to my left. And the most important one is just right here. This is Miss Jill. All right, everyone seen the minutes? Received the minutes? Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Let's go to number 2, amendments and additions to the agenda. We will have a small discussion on our new table of contents. That was by Commissioner Schoonmaker and Ms. Drew. It looks great. And I would like to add a discussion on Robert's Rule of Orders, if that's possible. Anyone else? Seeing none, motion to set the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion to approve by Commissioner Schoonmaker and second by Commissioner Frazier. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, now we go to approval of the minutes from January. Got a motion
Second.
from Commissioner Hill, seconded by Frazier. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Do we have any considerations of any late additions? I hadn't heard of any. Okay. All right, number 5, discussion and consideration of page 6 rule, section N, agenda item 10, regarding the discussion of zoning items at the commission work session. And you should have, Drew, did everybody get one of these packets? Should be the first one on your packet. Commissioner Frazier, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is in response to the discussion we continue to have at commission meetings about being able to discuss zoning agenda items at work session or at regular meetings. And so we just wanted to clarify that discussion at work session meetings are for discussion purposes only. They are not to be deliberated. There will be no staff present to ask questions. It is specifically just if a district commissioner or an at-large commissioner would like to provide any information to the body on any zoning issue or zoning item that we will be discussing and deliberating on the following week at the regular session.
Commissioner Schoonmaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we incorporate some verbiage where the work session agenda has a caption that we always, under a discussion, that it always includes the agenda items? So each month, we don't have to say, Madam Chair, we'd like to have for a discussion item, zoning items 51 through 73. We can just have an automatic caption on the work session agenda that just says discussion zoning issues or zoning items.
I'll look to the law director.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a matter of how you set your agenda. I think we did that last month.
We
something
did.
Very
We
similar
just-
to that. The thing that's important, and I think it's certainly strongly implied in here by the language, it says that it's informational purposes and for the purpose of setting the commission agenda only and not for recommendation for the commission agenda. If you want to make that a little clearer, you could insert a question or a sentence there that no vote on any zoning matter shall be taken at the work session, just to make it really clear that that's, discussion only and no votes to be taken. As far as the rest, that's just a matter of how you set your agenda. if you wish to have that on there. How did we do that last time? Didn't we have it as a?
Yeah, we had
I
it
don't
as
think
a
it's that-
discussion item, and it just
I don't
said
think it's separate.
items number, like I said, 51 through 73.
Yeah.
But what we need to do then is just have that as a standardization of the work session agenda, that there's a discussion item and it just lists the numbers.
Well, when you have here under Roman numeral 2 zonings, you could just have zoning request discussion or something like that. And then they would automatically be available for discussion but not voting. That's just, the not voting part is the important.
Okay. So Drew can handle that internally then.
Should be able.
We don't need a formal rule.
I don't, not on the agenda.
Okay.
Whether you want to add something to section N that makes it clear that there's no votes to be taken on zoning matters is up to you. I mean, we've been good about that since we pointed it out, so.
So that would not have to have a vote on that?
I mean,
Change the rule or add additions?
well, again, you're just setting it's how you're setting your agenda. I don't think there's any rule that talks about that, if you just want to make that a regular discussion item. And then as far as, what the sentence I've proposed, that's just up to you. Like I said, when you read it, it says it's for informational purposes for the setting of the agenda only and not for recommendation for the commission agenda. To me, that says no vote. So, I mean, I think it's already there. You could make it more explicit by saying no vote shall be taken.
Yeah, I would like to include that if we can. That no vote will be taken.
Okay.
Commissioner,
You put your hand, was that second?
Commissioner Jay?
No, I just want to talk.
Oh, I'll second.
I'm the only one down here, so sometimes I got to do this.
Well, you need to get closer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you could just twofold in the language, say, you could just change this line, that zoning request shall be listed on the agenda of the agenda of the agenda. I think you could probably just say of the agenda of the work session for informational purposes and for the purposes of setting the commission zoning meeting, and will also be included as a discussion item and no vote. So I think you could just change the language to say it will be a discussion item. All zonings will be listed as a discussion item and no votes will be
We
taken.
can work the language. You guys give us your intent. We'll put it into.
Does that seem, that would seem to clarify both?
Yep.
Madam Chair, you got I'll
just-
recognize you.
Thank you. Something that we had talked about previously was the fact to make sure that even though we're not voting, not saying, I will support this or I don't support this. I mean, technically, that's still saying how we will vote, even though we're not technically taking a vote. So I guess it's just as long as we stay away from that type of language, right?
Yeah, I agree. There's times in the discussion where I heard, I'm not in favor of this or something like that. To me,
Right.
that's telling you how you're going to, we got to watch our language. I agree with you. We have to watch our language. Yes, Commissioner
Okay,
Maker.
but we're in a publicly called meeting where we're having discussions. So if you had a regular agenda item, you could say, I'm in favor of that, I'm not in favor of that, if it was something. So on a discussion item with a publicly called meeting, why can't the sitting commissioner for that zoning issue say, I'm in favor of this, I'm not in favor of this, so at least we understand what's going on, and then can do additional due diligence in the following week?
Well, my first thought is that if I have one in District 9 and I've not spoken to someone, but I got a feeling that I don't want it because it's too many units per acre or whatever, and I say, well, I don't really in favor of this because of too many units per acre. They're not there to defend themselves. So,
You're just giving an opinion to the 11 members of the body.
I understand. I think we're treading on Mr. Law Director.
These matters are supposed to be looked at publicly, and this is a public meeting. Problem is, if we start discussing or making recommendations either for or against, or expressing our opinions either for or against, I think your point is correct. People who have an interest may wish to be here, and they may wish to be heard if we're discussing their items. I think if we're going to do this, and I know for a very long time we didn't do this, I think if we're going to do this, the best possible use is just to have sort of a report about what it's about. Okay, this is a rezoning, the recommendation from staff is X, the recommendation for anybody who wants to say. But to start expressing our opinions for or against is trotting a fairly difficult line, I think, when you're talking about somebody's project and whether they're here or not. This is why we do all the public notice for people for the regular meetings. I mean, beyond just we're meeting in session, when there are zoning items, signs are put up and stuff to tell people when and where to be there. So it's probably best if those things aren't really debated, even to the extent of saying, well, I'm for this or I'm against this. It would be better if that were not done. I don't know how you'd articulate a rule, and I hate to put down a rule that says a commissioner can't say X, Y, or Z, but I think it's bad practice.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Commissioner Daly. I tend to agree with what's been said. I do think, though, that Commissioner Schoonmaker made a very good point. When we are discussing other matters during work session, many times we will say, well, I can't support this, or I do support this, and we don't necessarily at that point stop and let anyone speak to it. So, we're doing that anyway. Now, I have no problem with what you've suggested about information only. I'm just cautioning us that this is a practice we already follow.
I agree with, I can see both sides, I really do, but I can imagine, I'm the guy that looks out there, okay? I can imagine that there's somebody standing in there 2 weeks from now, after we discussed it, and they lose and we're sued in court because they were not there to defend, and they'll sue for anything. So I'm just trying to err. I see Mr. Law Director, you got a opinion?
I agree with the proposition. This is not just something that's on the agenda that the mayor has suggested or one of the commissioners. This is an applicant that is wanting this body to do a rezoning. And I speak to you now not as a law director, but I come to you because I spent 30 years on the other side of that fence. And I knew when I came in, at the time I had to come in and address county commission was at the meeting. That's what was noticed. That's what the neighbors were noticed with the signs. And that's when I think the decision was going to be made. Now, if I'm on that other side and the decisions are talked about and made in a discussion session that I'm not being, I know the public notice goes out, but applicants don't appear at that work session meeting because they don't have to. And I think it's a due process issue, and I certainly, if they made a decision in a discussion matter at a work session that I wasn't there and not noticed that I needed to be there to defend my position, I would take that to court as being a violation of my due process rights as a property owner. So I think what Mr. Moyers has said is tread very, very cautiously on that.
Well, I think that all 11 of us, when we are all 11, because the at-large can discuss the zoning item too, that we be careful, that we don't lead someone into a direction for the following Monday's vote. So, I can say, Commissioner, you need to go, it would be better if you go look at this piece of property or something like that, and form your own opinion. So I think we're at a motion to change the language, right? Commissioner Schoonmaker? Did you make?
She made it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Frazier and I seconded it.
Right. Yes.
All right.
Motion to amend the language per the law director's
All right,
suggestion.
we have a motion on the floor to amend the language by Commissioner Frazier, seconded by Commissioner Schoonmaker. Any more discussions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, number 6. Discussion. Am I supposed to read that? You're going to be reading a lot tonight anyway. Discussion and consideration of page 9, Rule 1 or I, Section P, consent calendar regarding the education consent items pulled from the consent for discussion. I pulled that one, but I'm going to give that one to our law director to explain
All
that
right.
we might be treading on some water there.
Yeah, to go back to what we discussed at the commission retreat, the reason we have the education consent calendar arises out of the litigation that happened between the school board and the county back in 2000, 2001, whenever it was. And what came out of that was, the fact is, and this applies really to every county, the authority of the county commission is to set the overall budget of the commission and to set the broad budgetary categories for the school board. But after that, the school board is empowered by state law to spend its money however it sees fit. So what was happening before, and one of the things that led to the litigation, was the county commissions, the old commission, the 19-member commission, would have these education meetings and finance meetings, and they would bring the school people down here and grill them about every matter, and they would regularly turn down things that they really had no authority to turn down. And so one of the things that came out of that litigation was the education consent calendar. The reason we have it is because our county charter says that the commission must approve all contracts over a certain level. I think in the charter it's 50. I think we may have raised it to 100 by ordinance at some point. But in any event, the commission has to sign off and the county mayor has to sign off on every contract. So to make these two things work together, we created the education consent calendar. The commission's approval of school budgetary items is basically intended to be a very pro forma matter to comply with the provisions of the charter. It's not intended to be something where we get engaged in deep discussions. Now, I know the commission likes to know what's going on, and I don't think that the outcome of the litigation prohibits you from discussing matters that are on the education consent agenda, although I think most of the time it's ill-advised, but it's not prohibited. But what is prohibited is turning down items that are on that agenda. We have no authority to tell the school board they cannot use the money that we've granted them to sign a contract, whether we agree with it or not. And so I have noticed that from time to time, matters are being taken off of the education consent agenda for the purpose of discussion at the workshop meeting. My concern is, if you follow your normal process, you would then vote for a recommendation. What I'm suggesting is that we use language somewhat similar to the zoning language that we were just talking about, and say that if a matter is pulled for discussion from the education consent agenda, it will be re-added. There will be no vote taken. It's for discussion and informational purposes only, and it'll be re-added. And Jill's got some language, I think, that will accomplish that. Jill, you want to read that in, or?
To just add a sentence that says any item on the education consent calendar that's pulled for discussion at the work session shall remain on the education consent calendar for the commission meeting.
And that would make it just explicit that we're not voting, because my concern would be if one person passes or votes no, then it doesn't go on education consent. Then we're having a full discussion and vote at commission, and that violates the court order that resulted from that litigation all those years ago, and that we're still under, and they're still under, which is what we want. It's kept peace for the last 20 years, which is a good thing.
Mr. Schoonmaker.
So in other words, for the work session agenda, if the chair, somebody wants to pull number 15 that's under the education consent, the chair would say, we're pulling item number 15 to discuss, but would not ask for a motion and a
Right,
second.
exactly.
So that's the procedure
There's
that
a
the
dis-
chair.
Right, if there's a discussion, you can ask questions, whatever, try to get them answered, but at the end of the discussion, anything, just like a zoning matter, is there anything else? Then you go on to the next item. No vote to be taken.
Anyone else? If I pull school calendar item 12, and they say, well, I'll have to get back with you next week. It's really not on consent, but it's on consent. So we still take it the same way?
It's on consent because, again, even if you pull it off, let's say we had an item tonight on consent agenda, and you say, well, I'd like to hear from the superintendent on this matter, but the superintendent isn't here, right? It's still on consent because the fact is you don't have the right to say no. The only reason these are even on your agenda at all is because of the charter provision that says the commission must approve all contracts over a certain amount and that the county mayor has to sign off on all contracts in the name of Knox County. So we've got some state law that mandate one thing. We've got some charter provisions that mandate another thing. What came out of that litigation was how do we harmonize these things, okay? How do we don't want to say that one overrules the other where we don't have to. And so what came out of that was, okay, it goes on the commission agenda for approval because that's what the charter says, but because we have no right to say no, it goes on the consent agenda. And so pulling it off, I mean, it's for your own curiosity, frankly, because at the end of the day, you don't have any legal authority to say no. So there's almost no reason even to pull one off the agenda. If you have a question about it, it's just as easy to pick up the phone and call John Briswell. A full commission agenda of an item that you can't say no to is, say, a waste of time, but you have no choice but to say yes. So.
I understand, and the Carnes, I'll give you a good example that something that needed to be discussed was the Carnes Culinary building that money was approved for it and never paid. And it kind of was going to be snuck under, and it was pulled out, and we found out they used the money that was supposed to went to the building to build the culinary part of the Carnes High School. They used it for something else. And so they had to come and get more money. So that needed to be brought out.
Yeah, I mean, if they move money, and I don't know the circumstance you're talking about, if they move money between budgetary categories, they have to have authority for that. Okay, so if you give them $1 million for capital improvements, and they decide to take that $1 million and put it in teacher salaries, that's something they would have to come back and ask for authority to do. But if they ask for $1 million in budgetary authority for capital improvements, and you think they're going to spend it on Carnes and spend it on Powell, that's within their authority to do. And I don't think the commission can say no to that.
All right, Commissioner Frazier.
Would it best serve us if we just add on the agenda discussion of education consent?
Well, Jill has got
And
I think Jill's solved the problem here.
the language that Jill had read in a minute ago takes care of the problem. I think if you add an agenda item for discussion of education consent items, it almost encourages people to discuss all these things. In most cases, unless there's something that's really, really screwy looking, there should not be any need to discuss them because that's what we have a school board for. They make these decisions within the budgetary authority given by the commission. That's how these two bodies interact.
Just
Commissioner Hill.
a brief comment. I 2 or 3 times have asked to have things pulled, but it's been because I've been so excited about it that I wanted the commission to know that, the schools were doing this. So I would hate to totally lose that ability to have them be able to shine.
I think you have the right to do that, just no farther. And that's the only thing I'm trying to make sure that if something does get pulled off for whatever reason, that we don't end up voting on it because at the workshop, because that could end up the way our workshop rules go, giving us a problem at the regular commission.
All right, seeing no other lights, I need a motion for Jill's recommendation.
Motion to amend the language per the Law Director Office recommendations.
I have a motion to amend per the Law Director's recommendation by Commissioner Frazier, second by Commissioner Hill. Is that correct? Any more discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Ayes have it. Next item, item number 7. Discussion and consideration of, on page 15, Rural Beer Board regarding order of business. I think we discussed that back in January. Did I miss 7? I'm sorry. So we are on number 7. Discussion of page 15, Rural Section K Beer Board. Then I've got the wrong agenda. Let me find another agenda. I'm sorry. All right, I printed off the previous agenda. All right, item 7, sorry about that. Discussion and consideration of page 13, Rule 5 committees regarding commission chair serving on the other boards and committee as chair. That is mine. I thought that we're in our rules that the chair of Knox County could not serve as a chair of a committee. And come to find out, it is a standing committee only. My concern is that the chair that can appoint or say a ad hoc or say a special committee is formed, and the chair, a strong chair, I mean a really strong chair, can get enough members on that board to where they are elected chair, where then that chair, as chair, they guide the whole discussion. So for the future, not now, for the future of us 11, or the future 11, that the chair of Knox County Commission should not, in my opinion, serve as chair on any boards or committees, except for the ones that are listed in the Knox Ed, ID board and all that. Mr. Schoonmaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this would be effective September 1st of '23.
Correct.
Okay.
And anybody, Madam Chair is the chair of the Personnel Committee. As long as Personnel Committee, I don't know, is this an ongoing committee, Madam Chair? Until there's another election, Madam Chair, will serve as chair of that until another election, if this passes.
That's not the case. The chair is a member of the Personnel Committee, and so if I were to not be chair come September 1st, I would not be on the committee. The 4 other members serve for 2-year terms, and the chair serves as long as they're chair.
Their term.
As their term as chair.
Well, then September 1st, that would take care of, if we put in the language that Knox County Chair cannot serve as chair on any committee or board, that will take care of it unless you are reelected as chair. Make sense to everybody? No?
So you're saying?
Hold on just a second. I'm trying to follow Robert's orders myself. Mr. Frazier, your light's on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for anyone who served as chair previously. I know Commissioner Jay has served as chair. Did you serve on any boards, Commissioner Jay, where you were the chair, or committees where you were the chair as well? I'm trying to figure out what problem are we trying to solve? Has it created an issue or a concern in the past?
I'm trying to just think. I had a special called committee, but that was a temporary special called committee, so it wasn't a standing, or, I mean, it wasn't a committee that would last in perpetuity, like the Personnel Committee or other committees, standing or otherwise. And then external boards, IDB, Knox Ed, things like that wouldn't be the case. So I don't think that's the case. I think the intention of where Commissioner Daley is coming from is we've added a new committee that is the Personnel Committee is, I've never heard of it as being temporary. And, there's standing and then there's non-standing, and it was formed, but it wasn't formed as like a standing committee. It was formed as a non-standing committee, and so it's sort of over here by itself, where I'm not exactly sure that happened. I can't remember the discussion, the circumstances. Maybe that could be filled in, but I think if I understand Commissioner Daley's concern is that we've got sort of a permanent committee that is not under the rules of every other committee, which would not allow the chair to be both the chair of commission and the chair of a regular committee order. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
So, but I wasn't, when I was chair, I was not chair of any other committee. In fact, when it came around, somebody nominated me for something to chair, and we all said, no, I can't do it. So I think the issue is we just have this outlier. So I guess the question I would say is why, does anybody remember the discussion of why the Personnel Committee was not set up as a standing committee, which is like Finance Committee and all these other ones?
I would defer to Madam Chair on that.
Madam Chair?
It's because we have a non-commission member. Stephanie Candler, the Human Resources Director, is a non-voting member of the Personnel Committee.
But we have
Standing committees only are, per our rules, standing committees are commission-only committees.
Okay, so the Audit Committee would not be a standing committee? Because that has non-commission members as well.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
There are only 5 standing committees.
I dare not ask why that was set up in the first place, because God knows when it was set up. Long before any of us, I imagine.
Mr. Frazier?
I was going to say that may answer the question of that the Personnel Committee really isn't kind of a committee that's just hanging out there. It follows the other commission or the committee structures that have non-commission members, correct?
I think also, if I recall correctly, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that membership on the Personnel Committee is a 2-year appointment, and understanding committees are appointed annually, so that's a second difference between.
Mr. Schoonmaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think historically, because the chairperson has had so much responsibilities with all these outside requirements as chair of the commission, what they were trying to do, in a lot of cases, I think, was to allow other members who aren't chair or vice chair to have the opportunity to serve as a chair of a committee. And that's why you don't have the chair of all the committees. But because, really, I mean, you can ask Larson that the amount of outside events that he had to attend and committees that he was responsible for as the chairperson of the commission, it's pretty amazing. I mean, and so I think the intent was no chairman could be the chairman of a committee was for that reason.
Anyone else? I still, I'm looking towards the future that maybe we don't have a problem, but I'm telling you, in the future, we could have a problem with a very, very strong chairperson. They may have an issue that they're focused on. And they set up a special committee to look into this, and those 5 people elect that chair as the chair of that committee, and that chair can guide that in any direction they want to go. And the chair is a very strong position, very, very strong position. And Mr. Law Director, can the chair set up a special committee just by appointment?
Thank you. Yeah, Jill points out to me that it's section H. The chair may from time to time appoint a special committee, task force, or ad hoc committee as the circumstances require, but such a special committee, task force, or ad hoc committee shall be disbanded when it completes its assigned work, and in no case shall it exist longer than 1 year unless extended by resolution of the commission. No special committee, task force, or ad hoc committee shall be appointed for any purpose when there's a standing committee on the same subject. So temporarily, they could do that, yes.
Temporary. Has it ever happened? Probably not. Could it happen? Yes.
Yes, it did. Mr. Chairman, when I was chair, I set up a special committee to review possible reforms of the Merit Council. It was for a temporary purpose. It lasted 4 months, give or take, and disbanded when we completed the work. And it was for a very specific purpose, and then it did its work, and then it came back, and a certain amount of recommendations went to commission, and then the committee itself disbanded, so.
I didn't want to bring that up, but I'm glad you did.
No, it was, it's part of the legislative process. But
Yeah. So,
I think if I could, Mr. Chair, I think without some specific language or something that specifically helps address a future problem, I think everybody's struggling. I understand your concept, and we often work on rules that are not necessarily going to pertain to us, but future commissions. But I think everybody's struggling to figure out, like Ms. Commissioner Frazier said, sort of like what are we fixing, and is there some very specific language that helps address? I mean, if you want to propose that no chair serve, no commission chair serve on, as the chair of any committee, then that's a very specific action. But I don't think we've determined that yet. Ultimately, we have a chair election every year, so I could play the other side of the equation, which is if for some reason you had a chair that was very authoritarian and very controlling and had lots of votes and lots of people, then you ultimately could change the chair within 12 months. So we have lots of checks and balances to make sure somebody doesn't hold essentially too much power at any given time. Ultimately, the chair is more the parliamentarian and the organizer and the coordinator of many things than the decision maker when it comes to policy. But I think that's why we're struggling, if I could sum it up.
I will, if it's okay, I will sit down and discuss with the law director and see if this should move forward or not. So if it is, it'll be on the next agenda. If not, it won't be on the next agenda. All right, number 8, correct, hopefully. Discussion and consideration, page 15, Rule Section K, Beer Board, Order of Business. Is it necessary? Again, this is for the future. We're going to have probably 5 new members. Do we need an order of business for the beer board, like we do in zonings? It says, this is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, like that. So we will have an order in our rules, in our records. That's why I brought this up. We don't have, at this point in time, if you'll look, which one is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's just an agenda like we have in zonings. Mr. Schoonmaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I think that would help the clerk's office because sometimes we put the suspensions and revocations first, and then you have the folks that are here just for a new beer license sitting in the audience, where if that was reversed and it was actually in a format, because we should be taking the people here for beer licenses that haven't had a violation and then do the revocations and suspensions after that point. But right now, we have no, the clerk can do whichever way.
Commissioner Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's good to, we've spent a lot of time over the last 4 or 5 years doing everything from defining what is the role of the chair, the vice chair, doing a lot of documentation of defining, roles and responsibilities, changing our work, changing how we do our agendas. I think it's a good idea to, anything we can do to clarify, clean it up, put it in writing, and make it easier for the next commission, I'm all for, because it's been a bit of a loose mess, and we've really done a good job of kind of tightening it up. So I'd say yes.
Mr. Law Director, can we do this, or do we have to have it in a motion?
I mean,
I mean, without a motion.
well, I think if you pass a motion asking that we codify basically an agenda or order of business for the beer board, we can certainly put one together. And if you want the new applications to come before the disciplinary actions, just let us know, and we'll do it in that form.
Does the Rules Committee agree that applications should come before any suspensions, or? I do. Okay. Then I'm going to make a motion that we ask the Law Department to come up with an agenda for the beer board, with applications being first.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by the chair, seconded by Commissioner Frazier. Any more discussion? Yeah, because we can discuss it, and maybe if we need to change something, we can discuss it at workshop, or change it at workshop. Correct? All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, aye. All opposed, say no. Motion passes. I can't hear you.
Just as a side note, that's going to have to, whatever is, it's going to have to come to the clerk's office.
Number 9, discussion and consideration on page 18, outside conferences and travel. Mr. Schoonmaker, Commissioner Schoonmaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, everybody knows that the chair of county commission has the oversight over the travel budget and can decide how that's paid. In the past, I've looked at how other counties in Tennessee handle their travel budgets for the ones that have it. And one that I guess I kind of admired was Hamilton County. And what they do is they have, and let's just say for round numbers, if we have a $22,000 travel budget, that is $2,000 per commissioner. And the way they work it is, if, for instance, let's just say Commissioner Jay, Commissioner Hill have used up their $2,000 worth of travel budget, and Commissioner Lee still has $1,000 in her account, basically, and Commissioner Hill and Jay want to go to a conference in Texas, Commissioner Lee could say, hey, I'll take $500 out of my travel and give it to Hill and to Jay. So that way, and also with a set amount designated for each commissioner, you don't have, say, 2 or 3 commissioners using up the total fund for travel. This way, it's a uniform, you don't actually get paid, you don't have that, but it's just in record that you get this amount for travel and decide how you're going to spend it accordingly. But if 2 or 3 commissioners don't ever want to go to a conference, don't ever want to go to county government day, then they could allocate those funds to the commissioners who do want to go to those events.
Anyone else?
And I'd be glad to get the language together based on how other counties do it, if you're interested in going forward with that.
Commissioner Hill.
I guess I would go back to the question that Commissioner Frazier did in the last issue that came up. Is that in fact a problem? Is this a problem that we've had?
I don't know, because I think we've had to add to our budget over the last couple of years because more commissioners are now going. But again, it would just be more of a equitable, everybody gets this exact same amount, and then if it needs to be adjusted, you can adjust it internally.
Can I respond?
Yes.
The, the potential problem with that might be these commissioners that do choose not to travel at all, then does it become a mad dash for the other commissioners to go and say, I want your $2,000? I'm just asking. If you're going to, if you're going to piece it out per person like that, that could potentially just create.
Well, but you could also have 3 commissioners use the entire budget, and then people who want to go to County Government Day can't go, or to the Legislative Conference in May.
So
Can't go, because it's gone.
So to your knowledge, has any commissioner been told they could not go to a conference?
No, they've not been told, but the budget had to be increased.
Had to be adjusted.
Adjusted upward.
So if you've been on commission longer than any of us, is that a frequent occurrence?
Well, previously, we only had 3 commissioners who went to conferences. Now we've got close to 9. So the budgets had to go up to accommodate for that. But if you've got 9 out of 11 that want to go to a conference, and let's say they're not local, they're in Hawaii or Seattle, wherever it is, it's going to cost more money. And that's what I'm saying. You can run into an issue where 3 people or 4 people can wipe out the entire budget by going to 2 events. So,
Commissioner Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The chair has a lot of leeway and discretion, and I'm not aware of anybody who's ever been turned down to go to a conference. The budget has been amended, but I'll just remind everybody, the reason the budget has to be amended at time to time was, I think prior to, I was elected first in 2018. In the years 2015, 16, and 17, the commission budget was cut to like the bare bones. We didn't even have meals to help commissioners that were here for 10 or 12 hours, much less office supplies, much less, we had the dumpiest conference room and office in the entire building, and, Drusilla didn't have like a bottle of water. It was just slashed and burned, and only when we sort of realized we had to bring the commission office into the modern age did we go and basically ask for more money, and the finance department was more than happy to accommodate it. And I think ever since has been able to say, look, what's an appropriate budget? I personally think it's great that more commissioners are going to these conferences, and I think the chair can certainly advocate for more money, and as we go through the budget process, maybe modernize the budget even more to say what is more appropriate, because we have commissioners going to NACO conferences, which is pretty rare, but growing. The commissioner conferences are getting more popular, so I think I don't see a rule change here that fixes much, other than we should maybe work on our budget and let the chair support everybody as best they can. But I'm not sure I see a problem fixing it. And if we go through that, then I'm gonna, we're all lobbying each other to give each other, hey, maybe you don't want to go to that conference. Give me your, I don't know. It seems a little weird to me that I think we should just amend the budget and get some more resources to participate. So that's just my thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to echo what Commissioner Jay said, he kind of took everything I was going to say. I think this is more of a budget issue that we need to look at internally and go from there, because I don't want to deter anyone from obtaining additional information or education or resources. And, I would like to go to, lots of things, but I don't want to hinder anyone else from being able to go as well. So I really think that we can look at this, like Commissioner Jay said, and modernize the budget. I think we've got, like, as I've said before, a more community-minded body than we've seen in a long time, and we're willing and ready and able to do more. So I think we should just look at that, if that's okay.
Commissioner Schoonmaker. I think have you been recognized first? Commissioner Hill.
I just have a comment in hearing what you're saying. If we were going to put restrictions at all, and I caution myself even saying this, but perhaps limiting out-of-state travel to not more than one a year with special permission of the chair for a second one, or something like that, would keep, if we have a propensity to have a commissioner or two that want to go all over the country 4 or 5 times a year, that might help that, if you all even think something like that is necessary. But that would at least then offer some type of a stopgap, but not close any door either.
Madam Chair, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Hill, out-of-state travel has to be approved by the chair anyway.
Yeah, the out-of-state travel is very, very expensive. You know, it could be upwards to $5,000 just for one trip, which eats into the budget in a hurry. I guess the best thing that we need to do is, we're probably too late this time, but next year, have a list, say, Commissioner Daly, where are you planning on going? So Drew will know, she knows about what it costs per person, so we can get that budget to where we don't have to go back and amend the budget. So, Commissioner Maker, if you want to research that more, do that for me if you would. Okay. All right, number 10. Discussion and consideration on page 22, order of procedure regarding reporting of Planning Commission's recommendation. Commissioner Schoonmaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would be beneficial for the person that's appearing from Knox Planning to be one of the senior planners as opposed to the executive director. I would prefer to hear information and have that person on hand who's a senior planner as opposed that actually works with the nuts and bolts of that process, as opposed to just the executive director coming and reading the verbiage in front of them. To me, that doesn't do us, there's no benefit to us there. And when we say on number 5, a staff representative, that's never really been spelled out. What is a staff representative? So this is for the thought process here.
So what is your recommendation? What would you?
Well, I was going to list, Mr. Chair, if you'll defer to Commissioner Frazier, I'll hear what she has to say.
Okay. Commissioner Frazier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Commissioner Schoonmaker. It is extremely helpful when we do have senior planning staff present and can answer questions, and they've been actually working on the cases. I think it's something that we should probably have a discussion with Planning Commission and staff first before we change our rules and get their input and guidance, just because it is impacting their staff and their team. But I agree, it is extremely beneficial and helpful to me to have those senior staff and senior planners present. But I think we should take it back to Planning Commission and talk to them first.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Schoonmaker, would you be willing to go to planning and ask them if they would and bring it back?
Be glad to.
Thank you.
And then we'll have Jill write it up.
Number 11, discussion and consideration on page 22, application postponements and withdrawals on zonings. Commissioner Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is something that's come up several times during our meetings, and it's just a process that I don't think we've actually been following. And that's when we do have an applicant who asks for a withdrawal or deferral at the zoning session. According to our rules, if they do request a withdrawal, then the matter should be considered a denial if they don't follow proper process and submit a request to postpone or withdraw by a certain time frame. So I wanted to bring that to the body's attention and ask, is that something that we need to further clarify? Is that something that the body would like to change? But it's something that currently we're not following regularly. So I just wanted to get people's input and discussion.
Commissioner Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think like any great rule, no matter how we write it, somebody's going to have a workaround. If I was an applicant and I didn't get my deferral in time on my rules, I just wouldn't show. Because the rules say a no-show is an automatic 30-day deferral as a courtesy. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be a workaround. The hardest part is, as stuff comes up, I think tracking, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a recent circumstance where they may have come in and asked for a deferral. We haven't had one of those. So the whole point of this was, originally, we had people that sort of read the tea leaves, saw they were going to lose the vote, and then last minute pulled out. And we were trying to present, this was the fix to keep people from bailing at the last minute when everybody's shown up. So are we just not enforcing this? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. We've had instances where applicants have come before us and actually asked the commissioner maybe to put forth a withdrawal or say the applicant has asked to defer. And per our rules, the matter should be considered a denial if it did not follow the correct submittal process for a postponement, deferral, or withdrawal.
Yeah, I think you
I
should
will-
weigh in on this.
Commissioner Jay, the Tazewell Pike, Tazewell Pike was one that he wanted to defer, and he couldn't. It would be considered a denial, so Madam Chair made the motion to defer for 30 days so he wouldn't be withdrawn. Then Commissioner Beeler had the same one, I think, a month or two ago. So instead, what we've done, we did the workaround to where we as a commissioner can request
I see, okay.
defer.
Yeah.
But if we follow the rules, that if they don't have it within 5 days, whatever, it has to be in writing within 5 days, that Wednesday before.
Yeah.
or
We could
something
also
like that.
suspend the rules at any point.
always suspend.
And then do whatever we wanted anyway. I think the general sentiment of this body has been, we are hesitant to get people into a point in which they cannot use their land for a year because of some scheduling or parliamentary issues, and we're really hesitant to like just jack people when we're not close. But this was the stopgap to the last thing. So is there a proposed stopgap for the next thing, or is it just a matter of enforcing it? All of our rules, there's probably 20 rules the last time we really did a deep dive that we don't enforce on a daily basis. Like how many minutes do you get to talk and how many times do you get to talk? And I mean, there's all kinds of little things that are the gray area of how strict we are. So I guess, if there's specific language to debate, go for it. But I don't know how somebody wouldn't just do another workaround.
This is what I'd ask Commissioner Frazier to do, to watch and take notes of if anything that's coming up in the future. And if we see that it can become an issue, I think we need to bring it back in the future sometime.
I'm happy to do
I
that.
understand exactly what you're saying. And some things need to be with. So, all right, any other comments on that? Quickly, any other business? I'll jump in. Robert's Rules of Order, I apologize, I don't want to make anybody mad, but we've got to follow Robert's Rules of Orders because we're going to have new commissioners in a year or so, a little over a year. And we got to follow the Robert's Rule of Orders to make sure that the new ones follow Robert's Rule of Orders. And I'll be the first one to apologize. There was a question asked, and I'll start talking in that microphone. I wasn't recognized. can't talk in that microphone until I'm recognized, or give the floor to someone else. So it's not, we just got to start, I think we need to start paying a little more attention to the Roberts Rule of Orders, and that's what we go by, our county rules, our Roberts Rule of Orders. So don't be mad at me, but I'm just looking at the future, okay? It's what I'm looking for. Anything, anybody else on the Rules Committee? All right, we'll have probably one final Rules Committee sometime in July. Any other things? I need a motion to adjourn because it's 4 o'clock.
So moved.
We are adjourned.